Now, I'm joined by the editor-in-chief of Startup Africa, which is a digital publication, and that's Baradi Moletsane. Baradi, afternoon to you. Welcome to Business Unusual.
Good afternoon, good afternoon.
Your first time, right?
Definitely, yeah, it is.
Just briefly, before we start, Startup Africa, what is it as a publication, and what is it that you guys do?
So Startup Africa is a pioneering digital monthly magazine that profiles startups on the African continent. We also look out for progressive businesses and trailblazing celebrities or anybody that's sort of contributing towards the economy of the African continent. Yeah.
Now, having interacted, I guess, with many people in that startup ecosystem here in South Africa, the big question that we want to find out this afternoon is what are some of the insights that you've seen there from a jobs perspective? Because much of what we see, even the National Development Plan says, much of our job creation fortunes are going to rest on whether or not we're able to grow and ensure that, you know, small enterprises are able to survive.
Definitely. So what I've picked up from a lot of the interviews that I've done is that one of the things we need to look at is that when you look at an entrepreneur, right, you need to look at the fact that when they employ somebody, that person can help about 6 people within a household, right?
Sure.
We tend to ignore that. And by that, I don't only mean looking after monetarily, but I also mean that they can take someone through school. So we need to discuss the sort of ripple effect that entrepreneurship has on families and how it empowers families as well. So I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs who have put people in school.
Sure. And
by virtue of that, these people study and they get jobs. You know, so there's sort of like a circle that goes around, and it's really amazing how entrepreneurs can sort of like establish people around them and do so much for them, you know?
And I guess, Baradi, I mean, I would also think, certainly in my own experience, that, you know, it means more to employ that one additional person in a business where you've got, say, about 6 people or 3 people than it would in a business that has about 5,000 people, because that marginal sort of hire is really, I guess, insignificant and inconsequential to the work that is done, whereas if there's 5 of us and we're adding a 6th person, you can imagine what impact that is going to have.
What a ripple effect it has. I think additionally, another thing we need to look at is that if you look at people that are employing people, right, and you compare it to like an existing business that's doing well, the costs are often low with your SMMEs, right?
Yes.
And that means that there's purchasing power because their products tend to be cheaper, right? And by virtue of that, it creates a demand. You know, I always use the townships as an example, is that a lot of the entrepreneurs that operate in the townships spaces is that they're not only innovative, but they bring products closer to people.
Yes.
So by virtue of this, accessibility is a thing. And then it creates a demand. When it creates a demand, what does it do? It affords people the opportunity to get jobs because they'll obviously need to employ more people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, I mean, I like the point you're making around the ecosystem of demand and how, you know, that one additional rand you're injecting into that community is able to go into many other spaces. What have you seen, I guess, when it comes to the challenges that smaller enterprises have in employing people? I mean, we've spoken on this platform about, for instance, the Youth Employment Tax Incentive, and how it really, by and large, the people who benefit from it are people who have businesses that are turning over more than 10 million.
Yeah.
So it's largely the big guys who are able to benefit from demand-side policy that's targeting, you know, getting more people into jobs, and in this case, for younger people. What are some of the other challenges that small enterprises have raised with you guys at Startup Africa?
So some of the conversations that I've had with some of these guys is that labor laws are killing them, you know? They complain that, okay, yes, my business is registered, but there are certain things that are missing. You know, there's always some sort of a loophole, and because of this, I can't compete with big businesses. And it's so unfortunate because I'm talking about people that are very talented and have so much to offer, you know, in terms of products and services. But because they have to compete with these big businesses, right, it becomes a bit of a problem, you know. And when we talk about government red tape and stuff like that, it affects them. So it really, it makes me so upset that there's also a lack of knowledge.
Sure.
A lot of entrepreneurs come from rural areas, right? And they're still learning. They learn as they go. They sell as they go. And there's,
Just on the issue of knowledge, I mean, certainly all of us are in the game of, you know, getting information out there to people, making people more aware of some of the opportunities that are out there. It might be financing, it might be an incentive, just like the one we discussed. Where are you seeing some of the bottlenecks in that space? I mean, I go back to the example of the Youth Employment Tax Incentive. You know, we did a snap poll and we asked people, how many of you actually know about this? And by and large, many even of the urban entrepreneurs were saying, I've never heard of this thing.
Yes.
So what does that mean, I guess, for the communication machinery of many of the people who provide support? It might be private sector opportunities or even opportunities in the public sector. And with all of these sort of social media platforms that we have, one would think it would be much easier to disseminate information and that
A lot
there wouldn't be
easier.
barriers to accessing that information.
And unfortunately, there are barriers, right? But I'm just saying that it's important for us as people, especially someone like myself, to educate somebody who sort of lacks the knowledge.
Sure.
And I always say that we're living in an era where you can literally talk to the entire world, you know, in real time, right? That's what social media allows us to do. So I think we need to encourage people to sort of go to like internet cafes. This is if you don't have an iPad or you don't have access to the internet, you know, and do your research, learn and talk to people around you. It's important to create these conversations so that you can learn from one another, right?
Yeah. I think the other, for me, determinant, as somebody who runs a small business, and this is just sort of my own experience and insight, is that, you know, in the absence of sizable investment, be it by the enterprise itself or even on the back of financing, you're unable to invest in your production process in a way that necessitates you hiring an additional person. So yes, it's all good and well to say I've got this big client order and therefore I'm going to employ people. But I think the other side of the coin is that you need to make the necessary investments in the business to justify that additional hire. And are we seeing that happening for many small businesses? And if not, you know, what are the reasons?
Not in many cases, not in many cases. But I always say to people, start small. Start with what you have, and the little bit that you have, invest in your company.
Sure.
I speak to so many entrepreneurs who are like, I need funding, I desperately need funding, you know, and they need large amounts of money. And I always say to them, work with what you have. Eventually, as you're selling and as you get your profits, you'll sort of plow it back into the business, right? And it will grow. You know, so I think another thing, we need to remove the mindset that I need funding, bulk funding right now. You know, work with what you have, work with people, collaborate. I speak about collaboration a lot when I speak to some of these entrepreneurs, you know. There's different people with different skill sets that can sort of help your business to grow. You know, if you are in need of a public relations officer who can get your name out there, I mean, team up with one, you know, work on barter exchanges. I talk about this a lot.
Trade exchanges.
Trade exchanges. There are so many young people who are entrepreneurs and they want to do a lot, but they don't have the resources, right? So why don't you go look for people who can sort of plug in into what you can do so that you can move forward together?
And I guess in the context of what we're discussing today, it's also about sharing some of the human resources.
Exactly.
I mean, you might have a graphic designer, I might not have one. And of course, there must be scope for us to be able to say, can I piggyback on some of the resources you have? And in so doing also, I guess, exchange some of the stuff that I might have that your business might not necessarily have.
Yes.
Yeah. Baradi, it's been a pleasure having you on Business
Likewise.
As Usual.
Thank you for having me.
Wish you all the best. And just lastly, I mean, where do people get hold of Startup Africa?
All right, so Startup Africa, startupafrica.co.za. And if you want to reach our latest publications, it's under issues on our website. So it will have